This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Dean Haspiel. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Gene. And we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this episode, Gene and I have the pleasure of talking with Dean Haspiel. He's got a new book out right now, in fact, The Red Hook, Volume 1, New Brooklyn. And it's a fun read, and we had a very fun conversation, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. The conversation is almost as wide-ranging as Dean's brain. Not quite.
Yeah, we were all over the place. But before we get to that conversation, we want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the good folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts can be anywhere from 20 to 35% off, and every single month you're going to find incredible specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off, sometimes 50% off cover price, but who knows, every now and again you may find ones that go higher than that.
Yeah, and besides the bundles and all the discounts we got there, we can get discounted books by our guest today, Dean Haspiel. They've got a bunch of them for you. The two volumes of The Fox that he talks about, also Fear, My Dear, which is a Billy Dogma experience. The Red Hook, which we just were about to talk about. Even a book on Dean Haspiel, The Early Years, which is kind of half biography, half interview, half early comics, so that's three halves. Also some of his work with Harvey Pekar and American Splendor, and even the Activate primer, which we talk about the Activate co-op that he was a part of, that he put together at least a little bit in this interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all at incredible discounts, anywhere from 30 to 45% off. You really can't beat the prices at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com. They will take care of all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your titles there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
Ka-ching!
Gene, this was a very lively, to put it bluntly, conversation that we had with Dean.
Yeah, again, I've known Dean, probably about 20 years now. Meeting back when we were both on an internet discussion list, and he was still making his photocopied mini comics, and he's come a really long way. But he was an idea machine back then. He's a huge idea machine now. And
there are a lot of those ideas that come out of in our interview.
Exactly. And I didn't get to say this to him in person, but I'll leave this here for him. Dean still has the swagger of a young Brando. I described him that one time about 15 years ago, and he thought it was hilarious. And I meant to say it to his face, and I forgot.
Mm. Well, let's listen to our conversation with that swaggering Brando right now. We're really happy to have on the Comics Alternative Dean Haspiel. He's got a new book that is out today, at least in wide release, coming out from Image Comics, The Red Hook, Volume 1, New Brooklyn. Dean, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Great. It's great to have you here, Dean. I'm going to start with one canned question, and then we're going to go off from there.
Okay.
Could you just briefly just describe the premise of the Red Hook as a character?
Okay, so the answer I try to use, which is a loaded one, is the Red Hook is a super thief that is bequeathed the Omni-Fist of Altruism and is forced to become a superhero against his will or he will die, during a time where Brooklyn reveals herself to be sentient, and she is heartbroken by the apathy and indifference of the world, and decides to physically and literally secede from New York City, ergo America, to start her own republic.
And at this point, your listener kind of just defecates him or herself.
That's right. Hopefully, and by the way, that could describe like one panel of a Jack Kirby comic.
Yeah.
If you think about it. So well, I ain't got nothing on Kirby.
But on the topic of Kirby, hero. I mean, there are parts of this that are very Kirby-esque.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I realized recently that I was never really ready for prime time. You know, like, even though I've dabbled and drawn some Marvel and DC comics, you know, I was always too indie for the mainstream, too mainstream for the indie. I've been hopscotching the industry throughout my career. And finally, I just resolved, I luckily got to a place of some autonomy right now. And with that in mind, it means that I'm just going to have fun. And I'm just going to, you know, create authentic personal comics that hopefully will sell. And if I can continue that, that would be amazing. I mean, that's the dream, right? For an author and or cartoonist. And so I'm trying to write and draw the things I want to read and see. You know, I mean, I think that's the ultimate goal for a lot of us. Plus, while I'm doing that, I am also trying to react and reflect the world around me to some capacity.
Well, one of the things you do, I guess it's in the introduction to this new book, is you tell us how you got to Webtoon. And in fact, we should mention that the core of this new book, Red Hook in New Brooklyn, appeared and still appears, which is I'm
right.
impressed by, at the Webtoon website. So you tell us how you got to Webtoon, but how did you get from Webtoon to Image?
So, I mean, for those folks who don't know what Line Webtoon is, it's a free webcomics app called Line Webtoon, and it's been around for about 10 years now. And they furnish vertical scroll comics. The best way to describe it is kind of like taking a roll of toilet paper and you start pulling, you start pulling it and comics appear. You know, It's the same idea. But a digital version of
Marvel did that in the 70s.
With toilet paper though, actual toilet paper.
Actually, there was like a Hulk story printed on toilet paper.
So there was a narrative done, like you would pull, and then you would like once you used what you needed, you'd have to wait to the next time to go to the bathroom.
I'm not sure how narrative it actually was, but I mean, I've seen photos. I've never actually held it in my hands or used it in any fashion.
It just seems like a no-brainer, that idea, because it's as long as you have panels, right? You can create toilet paper comics. Again, not the best analogy, for Line Web. But so a few years ago, the editor Tom Akel approached me at a Comic-Con. He was very familiar. We had parlayed before because he knew that I was a webcomics guy in a lot of ways. I co-created, co-founded, and curated Activate, which was a free webcomics hub at the Live Journal blogging platform until we transitioned over to our own website. But I started that in 2006 with a handful of artists, and then it grew exponentially. And I did some of my Billy Dogma comics there. And I would do that every week because I realized then that when I was working on a project like, let's say, Harvey Picar's The Quitter graphic novel, I would disappear for about a year and a half, meaning it would take me about a year to draw it. And then there's some time to, get it produced, it published, it comes out in the stores. And then maybe you have a handful of weeks of some kind of play, some kind of review, people talking about it, hopefully. And unless it's Watchmen or Dark Knight, it disappears, right? So, and that's just the nature of publishing in a lot of ways. So I realized back then that, to disappear like that, to have a book come out for a handful of time and then go away, wasn't the best way to serve my, persona and love of the form. So I thought, well, why not produce something for free on a weekly basis and show that I'm still around. And on top of it, a couple of things. I was writing and drawing my own comics, which meant that I was kind of exercising, myself as a writer. And I didn't have a lot of confidence as a writer, and I still don't have as much confidence as I do in drawing. But I'm getting to a better place with that. And also, to be actually creating another graphic novel subsequent to the one I'm drawing for pay, So you're producing two books at the same time. So I've always been an advocate of webcomics, even though, to be honest, I don't really read a lot of webcomics. I still love holding these things in my hand. So to circle back of how I got it in print, Line Webtoon is going to keep, Red Hook and other comics I'm doing at Line Webtoon online for the foreseeable future. That's part of my contract with them. They get to have an exclusive. But it's at a certain point, I am allowed to take what I've done online and put it in print or merchandise it, make T-shirts or whatever it is I want to do. And so the time was ready for me to have something in print. I wanted to have this in print because I felt like a lot of my base readers probably still don't read a lot of webcomics. They like you guys. I mean, we can talk about that. I don't know if you read webcomics. Actually, no, you do read webcomics because you review them, right?
Yeah, we have a monthly show devoted to webcomics. In fact,
right.
on one a couple of years ago, we did, I think, the first few installments of the Red Hook.
That's right. So, but let me ask you this. When you are, what is your go-to? Do you still go to, on a Wednesday to pick up the new books or, to a bookstore, or are you slowly reading your comics more like on a tablet or on your phone, or, is one trumping the other? What's up with you guys with that?
Oh, he's turned the tables on us.
You go first, Gene.
Well, I'm kind of all of that. I'll admit that. I mean, Derek does a webcomic show. I don't do the webcomic show. I don't read a ton of webcomics myself either.
Right.
I've got a local comic shop for the first time in my life. So
really?
I do have a Wednesday thing now. I never had that before.
But wait, Gene, don't you live in Chicago?
I live in Evanston now. Yeah, and there's a great shop right here in Evanston.
But you didn't have one for a long time, it seems.
Well, yeah. I mean, Albany, not a lot. Houston, nothing was close ever.
Really? Okay. That's sad. I feel bad for you.
Yeah. Well, no,
I'm so lucky.
Actually, I tell a lie because when at University of Connecticut, there was a little paperback bookstore that also did comics as well. So I just told you a huge freaking lie. But other than that, I do that. Mm-hmm. I do some tablet stuff. Whether it's borrowing from the library or like Marvel Unlimited or something like that. And
a lot
also,
of my friends are reading. Books. A lot of my friends are reading Marvel Unlimited. They're waiting. What is it, like a 6-month wait period for the newest comics?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then what about Comixology? Have you guys ever gone to Comixology?
I have a few times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, they're actually integrated with Marvel. Well, with Marvel, but not Marvel Unlimited. The Marvel thing is weird because there's Marvel Unlimited, plus there's the Marvel that's part of Comixology. It's a whole weird thing. But yeah, I've done a lot of Comixology stuff.
Okay, all right.
But that doesn't mean that I don't have 14 bookshelves in my 1-bedroom apartment.
Well, I mean, Gene, I know you from SPX days, and I mean, did you just go to comic events and or the comic shop occasionally and just get a huge haul of stuff? Is that how you would collect your comics and get your comics? Pretty much, yeah. Okay. That's what I've been doing lately. I don't go every Wednesday anymore. I've reduced my reading. I'm also getting older and I just can't follow all these stories anymore. It's just getting crazy. But JHU Comics is my comic shop that I go to in Manhattan. I live in Brooklyn, but I actually go there. And these days I go about every 2 months and I get a haul of comics. I just get a bunch of stuff. And then, unfortunately, I don't get through all of them anymore. And then slowly but surely they start to, I start to not collect those that I'm not reading. it's almost like an out of sight, out of mind type thing, these days.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I still feel like I read a ton of comics. So it just means that there's more out there than ever before.
Right. Now, I do read webcomics, but most of the webcomics that I read are limited to those that we look at every month for the show. It's a rarity that I will seek them out outside of looking for material for the podcast, but I do read them. I read a lot on my tablet, but I mostly read in hard copy. And I don't go to I have a local shop that I go to. Heroes Aren't Hard to Find in Charlotte. Great guys.
It's supposed to be a great shop.
Oh, it is. It's a fantastic shop. And in fact, this weekend is Heroes Con.
Heroes Con, which I need to go to someday. I've heard nothing but amazing things about it.
Oh, it is amazing. But my real shop is Discount Comic Book Service, which is also our sponsor. So I get my comics via ordering through the mail.
Okay. And let me ask you this then. If you're ordering through the mail, are you doing the wait for the trade type thing, or are you actually getting floppies?
Sometimes I'll get floppies, but I mostly get the trades and original graphic novels, if you want to call them that.
Okay, and may I ask, how do you ascertain which webcomics to read for your monthly review?
Sean Kleefeld is my colleague for that, and more times than not, I will rely on him. He's a real good go-to guy when it comes to webcomics.
Cool.
But I will also seek something out, and if something, I read it and it strikes my fancy, either the art or the writing, or even both is even better, then I'll suggest, why don't we look at this the next month?
Right.
So, I mean, it really has to resonate.
Yeah, I've been talking to Tom Akel and a couple other people about the fact that, we have our Eisner Awards. We've had other awards for print comics. And recently there'll be like one category, like best webcomic, right? Which is almost impossible because it's like you only have 5 or 6 choices, and there might be more webcomics than there are print, these days, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you pick 5 or 6 comics for that category? And the answer is really, you don't. What you do is you start a webcomics awards, but who's going to do that?
That's what one should do. But, I mean, there's a lot that we don't know about the...
But Derek, just to finish a point, I was going to say was, and it's not about the award. Mm-hmm. I hate to say it's not about the award. Even though I won a Ringo Award, my first industry award last year for best webcomic, which was amazing, and I love that. But it's more about the acknowledgement and getting people to know about the work. Like, look at the Eisners this year. I'd say that about 70% of those nominations, I've never heard of these comics. Mm-hmm. And now I'll check out some of them because, like, what are these? Why did they get nominated? They stuck out. They made muster, And I think that's what awards really do, is that they turn people on to the new stuff, And we need more like of those situations to turn us on. And that's probably why I think we need a webcomics award more than ever before, is because there's so much stuff that I'm almost afraid to open that door in a lot of ways. And again, even though I truck in webcomics, even for me, it's a deluge. It's like outer space.
Well, it's kind of like blogging. Anyone can create a blog. Anyone can create a webcomic. And the vast majority of the webcomics are nothing more than blogs, because the way that they're constructed, the way that they're organized are like blogs.
Yeah.
And people use blogs of a variety of sorts, even use Tumblr to create webcomics.
Or Instagram. I've seen webcomics on Instagram where people are using that.
I've heard of that. I haven't seen that, but I've heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen a few, like you do like a 4-panel comic, so you can just upload 4 and you can just swipe through it.
Yep.
Okay, well, guys, you can tell me if this is a good segue, because I want to get back to you, Dean. Now, you have yet another webcomic on Webtoon that is completed, and I'm assuming this is going to be volume 2 of the Red Hook series, Warcry.
Warcry. So, just to finish the answer before, is like, how did I get it into print? To be honest, and everyone who listens to this is going to hate me.
Oh, that's right.
Now.
We lost the train of thought about how did you get to Image.
No, and we'll transition to Warcry. But I had published a comic called Brawl in like 2007. It was a 2-man anthology. It was me and Michel Fiffe, and it was half the book was Billy Dogma, the other half was a comic called Panorama that Fiffe did, and we had a 3-issue black and white miniseries. So I had a few emails, dangling from back in the day, and I've met with Eric Stevenson in the past, and he's really cool. And I knew that New York Comic Con was coming up, because I go every year. And this was the most recent New York Comic Con a few weeks before. Let's say October or whenever it is. And I emailed Eric with a link saying, hey, I have this webcomic, The Red Hook. And I drew it first for print, and then I cut it up for line Webtoon, for digital, for the vertical scroll. So I showed him what it would look like in print, like a chapter. And I just sent it off thinking, okay, it'll go into the ether. I'll never hear from him. About 10 minutes later, he wrote me back basically saying, let's do this.
Dang.
And it was the fastest pitch and response I've ever experienced. And again, everyone who's waiting for a response back from Image is going to hate me. But so then about 7 months later, you're holding the book in your hands, and a lot of that has to do with the fact it was already underwritten, paid for by Line Webtoon to basically, they paid me to create something I own, which again, I'm in this beautiful autonomous space right now where, Tom Akel and Line Webtoon believed in me and afforded me a space to be able to produce something original. And also, I think the reason why they're doing that is because, they've had this app for the South Korean app for a good, 8 years before they started to actively pursue more American comics for their American version of their app. And I was one of the guys that they thought would help woo readers, but meanwhile, I struck a good deal with them, and now I'm able to kind of boomerang that content. I hate that term. Those comics into a print formation. And then luckily Image believed in me as well. So it's just a really good time for me right now creatively. And then I had the second sequel, the second story greenlit called War Cry.
Which ended just recently. Yeah.
Yeah. It just wrapped up, I don't know, like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And hopefully that will be volume 2 in print. And the way I'm looking at it is like this. Did I tell you guys that, when I pitched and sold Red Hook, I basically pitched a universe called the New Brooklyn Universe, which is what the volume 1 is called, New Brooklyn. Mm-hmm. Right. Where I was asked to produce one comic, but I came back at him with 3 ideas. One idea was created by the late Seth Kushner, my studio mate, who passed away a few years ago from cancer. He had created a character called the Brooklynite, and with artist Seamus Vial. And then the third idea was a character called the Purple Heart, mm-hmm. that I co-created with the writer Vito Del Sante and artist Ricardo Venancio. And they rolled out one after the other. As one comic was finishing, as the Red Hook was finishing, we rolled out the Purple Heart. And as the Purple Heart was finishing, we rolled out the Brooklynite. So we have these 3 different characters that represent 3 aspects of New Brooklyn, this universe. Imagine like 1961 to 1963 Marvel Comics, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and Don Heck, and the progenitors of Marvel. That was kind of like the idea here. Even though it's kind of crazy to think that I would ever even dare compete with Marvel or DC, especially with their cinematic universes these days.
That's a whole other beast.
It really is, and actually, just as a tangent, aren't they going to quit making comics and just start their own channels and, movie theaters? Like, why even make comics, right?
Yeah, one would think.
It's crazy. It's amazing, actually. So
fantastic.
Yeah, well, that's next.
Uncanny.
That. Yeah. What would be the other one? Well,
Spectacular.
Mighty. Yeah. So I was afforded this space. It's really cool. Hopefully, we'll get volume 2 out there, because the way I see it is that the Red Hook, which is my series, is my anchor to tell these stories. So I'm always going to tell New Brooklyn stories through the Red Hook. I would love to see the Purple Heart in print as well as part of this expanding universe. And I'm also working with other writers and artists, with other ideas that hopefully can help bring this out in more so than ever before. So, but right now we need more. We need people to just see the book, read it, and guarantee once you read it, you'll be hooked. And I know that sounds really corny.
Red Hook.
But yeah, Red Hook. Well, I mean, you guys read it. What did you think of it?
Oh, I thought it was a lot of fun. I mean, I thought it was fun when I read it digitally, and then I went back to reread it with this new book, this new release.
Right.
And I enjoyed it much more the second time around than I did reading it online.
Oh, thanks. Did it feel different? Did you think that it had, the pacing was different, or only because of the way it's broken up? The online version is like you take your thumb and you scroll, right? And you get to the end of a chapter and you click. Whereas now you're going back to pages, and I just felt like it just reads like a different comic.
Well, it does. And also I went back to the webcomic on Webtoon, and I noticed that there were sections and images that you don't include in this new book. Mm-hmm, so what decisions did you make to do the editing? I mean, what was in your mind when you decided this had to be cut?
Well, first of all, eagle eye. That's cool that you noticed that. I really think that part of what I discovered in taking the initial, version that I produce, knowing it would be for print later, and then cutting it up for the vertical scroll creates a different experience. And what I was starting to do was sometimes expand panels or repeat a couple of panels or cut in closer to a panel and pull back out kind of effects, just because the pacing and the wording around everything is different. Like I could take 3 word balloons and like shove it into a panel of a traditional comic book page. But when it comes to the vertical scroll, I would have to balance that out differently, In fact, the font size, we're going to get a little technical here. The font size in the comic is I believe a 10-point font. It's Ben Oda's font, the old school letterer. The first cartoonist I actually ever met as a teenager, Ben Oda. And so it's a 10-point font in the book, but online it's a 36-point font, just to make it look like a 10-point font online, which is pretty crazy. But that was just part of like trying to figure this out. It became a kind of a technical challenge. And so some of the panels might just be kind of little repetitions or ways of kind of refocusing a scene. And then there were other panels, especially toward the end, where I'm showing a lot of artwork. And I borrowed a bunch of my girlfriend's paintings and art and illustration to show different types of art that is happening in New Brooklyn, because part of the New Brooklyn conceit, my fantasy, is that art has become a currency where you can barter art for food and services. And so, again, I know it sounds very hippy dippy, but I wanted to express that in the art because I realized one of the things I love about Jack Kirby is that some of his stuff is very prescient. I mean, you look at like OMAC, or you look at the Fantastic Four, and a lot of the ideas that were very, fantastical back then are now being achieved today. And I thought, well, you know what? If that's what art can do, if you can put something out there and change things for the better, why not try to do that? So that's part of my mission statement with the Red Hook is trying to make a better tomorrow today. And I think you guys were asking before where some of this came from. It comes from being a frustrated artist. It comes from living, I'm a born and bred native New Yorker. It's going to be really hard for me to move to a small town just so I can make comics, guys. I'm sorry. Even though I live small, I love New York City, and I'm trying to figure out a way to stay in New York City and make a living at making comics. But, the city and real estate developers and everybody's like always trying to raise the rents and make everything more expensive. And it's just getting absurd and ridiculous. When I first moved to Brooklyn 21 years ago, it was cheaper to live in Brooklyn. Now it's cheaper to live in Manhattan.
Really?
Jesus.
Yeah, it's insane. So, most normal people will be like, well, Dean, you got to leave. If you want to make your funny little comic books, go, live in a basement somewhere. But I don't want to do that. I'm energized by New York City. It's in my blood. It's going to be really difficult for me to leave here just so I can make my comic books. And also I'm using New York City in a way in my work to comment on the world. And that's part of what I'm trying to insert here into this story.
Yeah, your comics have always been really good about kind of establishing this sense of place.
Thank you.
And that place is very New York. And the other thing that really has been a hallmark for me, you said earlier that you don't have a lot of confidence in yourself as a writer. I think you are one of the best word craftsmansmith builder of metaphor that I know. Your words, the way you write, it's again the way you write and the way you plot both. It toes this line between the literal and the metaphorical.
Yes.
Everywhere.
Yes.
Just like the Omni-Fist of Altruism. Only Dean Haspiel comes up with something called that.
Well, you know what I realized? And first of all, thank you. That's really kind of you. I really appreciate that. I think, I grew up, my godmother, as you guys probably know, is Shelley Winters, right?
Right.
And she introduced my parents, and I'm on planet Earth because of Shelley. So one of the things, growing up is you start to watch, your godmother's movies, and what was she in? And that woman made every kind of movie, from literary to schlock. She won 2 Oscar awards for brilliant performances and masterpieces, to playing, some in horror films. And the reason why I bring that up is because I love all that stuff, and I try to mash it up into my work. I was on a panel recently at Book Expo America, and they were talking about genres, and they were like, well, what kind of genre do you do? And I'm like, I do everything. I try to do everything.
That's a weird question.
In my comics, it's superhero, but what is superhero? And I would hazard to say that superheroes is every genre. It is fantasy, it's science fiction, it's crime, it's romance. It's got it all, And like I'll watch, some praised movie that will win all the Oscars, or be lauded by critics and academics. And then, the next night I'll watch like what would be considered a piece of crap, and I'll find such value in it, And I guess to me, what I'm trying to do in my work is to parse that kind of thing in my work and try to find those sweet spots, where you're hopscotching between the absurd and the meaningful, And I'm always trying to make that mashup so that you're being entertained, right? But at the same time, you walk away and you're thinking about something, and your heart is filled.
Yeah, and I'll kind of along the same lines. As you're doing that, though, you don't like hit everybody over the head. Like the idea of art as a commodity,
right,
is sort of here.
Right.
It even reminds me of Billy Dogma's gun.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Going back to Billy Dogma's gun, that was it the Berserk gun?
Berserk gun,
yeah, which had all these different settings that the gun could do just about anything. But he almost never used.
It can shoot everything but bullets. That was the idea.
Yeah, but he almost never used the thing, and I was like, you've got these amazing ideas, and they are just kind of peripheral almost to some of the other ideas. There's like it's like, like I said, Kirby was an idea machine, boom boom boom. You are too, but you've got these things, and you kind of purposefully, it feels like you hint at things, or you introduce these ideas, but we only get to see them in little pieces.
Well, also because I feel like the ideas sometimes are too big, right? And too unwieldy in some ways that I can't even figure out. So I'm hinting at them, but I'm asking you as the reader to, take them to another place, so in your own head, so that actually you're becoming a co-author of the work in that way, because if I can put that hint of an idea into your brain, just like Kirby did for me or other authors, it starts to mull and you start to figure out ways to make it work, or not, or it could just be a dream. But I mean, I'm not going to sit there and get into the nuts and bolts of like, here, this is an artist trading for a cup of coffee, or a root canal, which is something I did. I actually I went to a dentist and I didn't have the money, and he knew I was a cartoonist and he liked comics, and I drew him as a superhero for root canal.
Wow.
So
I love it.
Yeah. But of course, it took a root canal to make my art valuable. Anyway, but yeah, no, and yeah. So I'm very aware of the fact that sometimes I'm throwing ideas out there, and I'm not like taking it all the way to the punchline. I'm letting it sit there and letting it stew and let it evolve. In fact, I'm with Warcry as a sequel. But did you guys get a chance to read that one yet?
Not completely, no.
Okay. Well, so that takes it to a whole other place, and again, it's very Kirby-esque. It's how do I describe this one? I thought the first one, the Red Hook, was hard to describe in a couple of sentences. In this one, spoiler alert: at the end of the Red Hook's girlfriend, the possum, sacrifices her life to help stop the invisible light from breaking the world in half, and she fails, but she dies. But at the very end of the Red Hook, she's an autopsy is about to be performed on her, and she's laying there when suddenly her eyes open. The end. Dun dun dun. Like cliffhanger. And to be honest, at that point, I didn't really know what I was going to do next. But I feel as a creator, sometimes you have to just throw things out there to see what you'll do with it later. Mark Waid is famous for when he was writing Daredevil, for instance, he would put Daredevil in a compromising position that you, as the reader, would be like, well, how the hell is he going to get out of this one, right? Mm-hmm. Mark said that even he didn't know the answer when he wrote that, and he'd have to sit there and try to figure it out. And he figured that if he didn't know, there's no way you were going to know either, So, and I kind of like that as a challenge. So, and I had actually done that in 2006 and 2007 when I did my Billy Dogma comics at Activate. I would create these little mini cliffhangers, not knowing where the story was going, so it would feel fresh for the reader and fresh for me. So I love that idea, that conceit. Anyway, so Warcry is I've been toying with an idea of mashing up two of my favorite creations, characters, besides the Thing, which is my very favorite character from the Fantastic Four. I want to do a mashup of Captain Marvel and OMAC, One Man Army Corps. And what I eventually came up with was a for people who don't know who Captain Marvel is, and I don't mean Marvel's Captain Marvel, but Fawcett,
the Big Red Cheese,
and then DC Comics' Captain Marvel,
the real Captain Marvel,
right. So Billy Batson is a young boy, a cub reporter apparently, who comes across this cave and is basically graced with the powers of Shazam. And when he shouts the word Shazam, he becomes this adult superhero, Captain Marvel, right? So it just takes this kid like shouting the word to become this awesome, being, right? OMAC, One Man Army Corps, is about a guy named Buddy Blank who kind of lacks any personality, is kind of a nobody, and is transformed from a scientist and a satellite beam into basically a futuristic Captain America. Did you guys know that was Jack Kirby's original intention for OMAC, was like a future Captain America?
I hadn't heard it that way, no.
That was like, he was going to play with an idea of like, what would a future Captain America be like? And that was originally the idea. And then he took it to DC and created OMAC. Anyway, so he becomes One Man Army Corps, this kind of altruistic kind of war machine. And then I mash up the ideas. And instead what I have is a young black teenager who is basically a laser beam is shot at him with all the DNA of all the superheroes, and he becomes the greatest hero of all a female human of mass destruction called Warcry. So I had this idea that I was toying with, and I was like, well, how can I fit this into the Red Hook? How can I make this work in the New Brooklyn universe? And I realized, she, the female aspect of this character, could be the dead girlfriend of the Red Hook. And I realized, as a straight white male who just turned 51 recently, maybe I wasn't the appropriate person to write a black teenage boy and a black female, character, but I could tell this story through the point of view of the frustrated boyfriend, i.e. the Red Hook, who's trying to figure out what the hell happened to his dead girlfriend and how can he woo her back and figure out what's going on here. So it's kind of like a little bit of a mystery when you read it. And of course there's a conflict that comes upon and all the, into the story, and then they have to defeat an enemy. And I won't get too much into that. You have to read the story. But that was the initial idea I had with Warcry and how to be able to tell it. And again, just pushing buttons, trying to have fun with it, with big ideas, hip checking the kind of comics that I love. So we have a little bit of Billy Batson, Shazam, Captain Marvel. You got OMAC. We even have little bits of Hawk and Dove, because the boy is more peaceful than her. She only comes around when there's conflict. So she's more of a hawk. And then we have a little bit of a firestorm, whereas the dual personalities kind of thing happening. So it's a really good, it's just like me taking my favorite kind of comic ideas and mashing them into one thing while perpetuating the story of New Brooklyn, getting more into the nitty gritty about that. And then the gangsters and how does New Brooklyn streets operate? Why do we need heroes? Why do we have villains? And just dealing with all the kind of stuff that we traditionally deal with in superhero comics.
Well, Dean, a couple of times during our conversation, at least a couple of times, the name Billy Dogma has come up. And I was wondering how much, if any, of Billy Dogma and Jane Legit are in the relationship between the Red Hook and the Possum.
So that's a really good question. Thanks for asking. At first, I would have said none. What are you talking about? and I realized little by small that because I haven't been writing and drawing Billy Dogma for a while, I think I'm innately, inserting aspects of them into these characters. Because, listen, for a long time, I've drawn other people's stories. I've drawn franchise characters. And once in a while, when I get to write and draw my own comics, like a Billy Dogma, or I do semi-autobiographical stuff, I tend to kind of revisit the same themes, which is about loyalty and love. And, I created these avatars, Billy Dogma and Jane Legit, to kind of express the things that concern me. And because I haven't been able to write and draw them recently, because I was able to sell this Red Hook idea, I think that they are slowly but surely transitioning, into the Red Hook and the Possum. Although I have written some very specific stories for Billy Dogma. In fact, I drew Billy a month ago. I sketched him just because I hadn't drawn him in a while. And every time I take a break from Billy and I write and draw him again, he evolves. And it's kind of a really interesting part of my career. But yeah, I think they're very different. They're specifically different. Like you can tell, like the Red Hook doesn't really talk like Billy Dogma does. And the some of the conflicts in a Red Hook story is a little more traditional to superheroes than in a Billy Dogma story. But, right. I do think that it's becoming thinner. Let's put it that way. So, and this third story that I'm writing right now, technically it's been announced. If you read the end of Warcry, it says that, coming next is a third Red Hook story. So it has been greenlit and the plot was approved. And right now I'm spending the last month, and I probably have another week or two before I finish writing the 130-page script of the next story. But it is a trilogy, and it's probably my most ambitious story to date. And out of the three stories, it's very Billy Dogma. Yeah.
So will this third one be the last in, at least for now, the Red Hook series?
It might be the last one at Line Webtoon, depending how well it does. It certainly is a trilogy, so it'll feel like a whole story. And the trilogy, the anchor for the trilogy is actually the possum, because unless of course the Red Hook dies, but he ain't died. And what I came up with is this beautiful sentiment that I hope I can pull off. But I do have plans and bigger stories for the Red Hook, including little short stories. I'd also like for the potential of a team book to happen with some of the characters. So my sights are set high, but I definitely have a trilogy here that I think would make a really good. Hell, I think you could probably tell the trilogy in one movie. You probably don't need 3 movies, And again, I hate that I just said that, because these are comics first. These are comics. But of course, as I get older and I get more tired at the art table, I wouldn't mind being able to sell the IP a little bit towards making bigger monies in the other mediums.
Mm-hmm. Dean, let's get back to this new book. Now, the core of it is the story that we've been talking about, the one that originally appeared on Webtoon. But there's much more than that. At the beginning of the book, we have 2 stories, Emotional Ebola Part 1 and then Emotional Ebola Part 2. And then at the end of the book, we have just a little few page piece, New Brooklyn, and then another Red Hook story, Hooking the Red Hook. Now, you mentioned writing an original Red Hook story. Is that Hooking the Red Hook?
So Hooking the Red Hook is interesting. The middle of that story, so I think it's 6 pages. So that means pages 2 through 5 is the original story I did, just kind of as a creative palette cleanser. In 2012, I got into the artist writers retreat called Yato. It's in Saratoga Springs, New York.
Right.
And it's an amazing place where you get to, they basically take care of you and let you just create on, in a mansion or on the grounds of 400 acres with a rose garden. And it's just incredible. And so I went there for writing, again, to kind of like confront my insecurities with writing. And I got in for writing, which was amazing. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm good enough to get in. Now I'm really going to confront this beast. But as a creative palette cleanser, because I do comics all the time, I decided, let me just quickly write a quick little comic book script, get it out of my head, and then tomorrow I'll work on prose and screenplays and whatnot, and scratch other itches. So that night, my very first night, Yato, in August, I think it was August or June, July, in the summer of 2012, I didn't really have anything to work on, so I thought, well, let me challenge myself. And I thought about an idea. I said, well, what if Jack Kirby and Alex Toth, another comic book creator favorite of mine, got together and created a character? What would that look like? What would that be? And originally the character was called the Rascal, which is, I still love that name, but it didn't have the same kind of, ambiance that the Red Hook has. But it was a character in Red Hook. And I came up with this short story, and then I decided, oh, okay, he's going to steal another guy's name, and that's going to be what the story's going to be about. And then he's going to become the Red Hook that way. And so I did this little quick story, had some fun with it, and then put it in a drawer. And then I spent the rest of my residency writing, a novel and some screenplays. And then a few months later, I was at another residency and I decided, well, let me try and draw this thing. So I drew it. And I put it in a drawer. And a couple of years later, I had an opportunity to pitch and write and draw a short Fox story for Archie. And if you look at the Red Hook, he's definitely influenced somewhat by the Fox, and that's what I was thinking about the Alex Toth aspect of it, was that Toth had done 2 short Fox stories in the mid-'80s in the back of a comic series. I don't remember if it was the Mighty Crusaders or what. Or The Fly, I can't remember. And, I really loved the way he had done this very pulpy version of this character. And of course, you add Jack Kirby to it, and it's going to be cosmic or get weird fast, you know. And so that was my initial idea, and it got me this gig. It kind of was a nice audition to get me the gig, and I eventually went to go to write and draw 2 5-issue miniseries of the Fox at Red Circle / Dark Circle Comics, with Mark Waid writing the script, the dialogue that is, and then, you know, so I was working, you know, I wasn't revisiting the Red Hook at that point. And then I came back to the Red Hook when I was given this opportunity to pitch to Line Webtoon. So anyway, that was the initial thing that I showed. And then I decided to bookend that little short story with a more updated version of the Red Hook, as if he's flashbacking to this story, telling this tale. So that's the back end of the book. The first 24 pages of the book is a 3-part story I did for Dark Horse Presents, and that's where that originally came out in. And that's a pre-New Brooklyn story where, again, I was having fun with short tales. I mean, I love telling, you know, 8-page stories or 6-page stories. They're harder to do, but if you can pull it off, there's nothing better. I mean, they're kind of like, that's what traditional Archie comic stories are, right? Aren't they like 6 pages or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
So anyway,
yeah.
So I just did this, like, kind of like warm you up with this kind of like goofy little story called Emotional Ebola that's broken up into 3 parts, and then we dive into the whole idea of New Brooklyn. And if you notice, the first chapter, between chapters 1 and 2 of New Brooklyn, a year goes by, because I realized that if, you know, Brooklyn is going to secede physically and become her own republic, I didn't want to deal with the minutia of, like, what the hell happened. You know, like the reality of that is horrifying in a lot of ways. You know, like, people died, subways were flooded, bridges were torn apart. You know, they had to create their own, you know, way of reimagining the world, and that was something that I just couldn't wrap my head around. Again, just hinting at ideas, you know, because what I wanted to play with more was the idea of this super thief that's forced to become a superhero.
Because of the pressure around his heart. That's such a Dean concept.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if you read when you know, hopefully your listeners will pick up the book. But yeah, there literally is a fist wrapped around his heart, keeping him in check. You know. And actually, Warcry, you guys got to read Warcry. That comes up a lot, and it takes a different turn. But yeah, no, I again, this was all big picture stuff, and there's no way in hell I could figure out half of the answers. You know, so you know, I asked a lot of questions, and I let you, the reader, or other better writers, figure this stuff out. You know.
Well, even Sam, or Red Hook's mother, is a crime fighter.
Mm-hmm. Her origin is basically like the Punisher. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's my Punisher, but and it's also attached to Sam Broja, aka the Red Hook's origin story, and she kind of becomes a psychopathic vigilante. You know. And she's trying to end crime because of what crime did to her family. You know, again, the Punisher. So, and he has to deal with his mom. You know, like, he thought he was a bad guy. He's got nothing. Although she thinks she's a good guy. At least he knows he's a dick. You know, like, at least he knows, like, yeah, I'm stealing. He's not evil. He's just a little selfish. You know, he also, you know, didn't really have a chance. So he felt like, well, I guess is the way I got to make ends meet, is by stealing and trying to create a better quality of life this way, you know?
Yeah. The kind of Oedipal thing you got going there is amazing. And I want to get back to the Kirby just for a second, because the Kirby and the wordplay at the same time, because the Iron Knee is a great name for a villain. and then you basically make him Arnim Zola. So
yes,
thank you for that. Arnim Zola is one of my favorite characters ever because it just looks so messed up?
It's so messed up looking. It's one of those characters you can't unsee. And then as a creator, you're wrestling with that and you're going, well, how? I need to get it off of me. It's on me. It's like, not only is it a great idea, but it steeps into your dreams. And sorry, I'm turning on a light here because it's getting dark in my house. But so I was like, I always love that idea. But of course, the minute you draw it, it's just total, you're just stealing, you know? So I was like, well, how can I have fun with this at least? And I there's a lot of puns in my comics. And I was like, oh, the irony. It's there, it's like irony. Haha. Of course, there's nothing ironic that I do with it. There's nothing ironic. And it's just so silly. So basically, a character named Benson Hurst, which is based on an area in Brooklyn, which some of the characters are named after. He gets his knee blown out and he comes back as the Iron Knee. So there you go. That's simple as that. And again, the only way it works, guys, is if the creator owns it. And I don't mean like owns it copyright. I mean, just says, fuck it. This is reality. This is how it's going to be. And if you can, I was going to say, if you could hold my hand, but if I can hold your hand and we could take this journey together, we're only going to have fun together.
Mm-hmm. Now, and it is fun. You mentioned the humor embedded throughout, and it is a very funny story, and not only for the, I guess, cultural or comic book, especially references throughout. I don't want to say that there's a lot of sex in the book because there's not. I came away from this story feeling that it's pretty damn sexy.
Well, that's cool. I mean, you know what you're reacting to? I draw the Red Hook's butt a lot. You get to see his butt everywhere.
I did notice that.
I didn't notice the butt, but I did notice the possum.
Well, yeah. Hello. So when the possum's around, you know what else?
Well, also the relationship between Red Hook and the possum. I mean, that's a very sexy thing in this book.
It's a sexy thing. I mean, their biggest concern with each other is, do we make love in the costumes or not? I mean, and then after that, it's whatever happens to the Red Hook and, all the conflicts that happen. But that's their biggest, question of the night. And I think that also because the way I draw costumes isn't with all the gadgets and the pouches and then this and the that. It's all very basic. It's just skin tight costumes with one or two colors. The end. That's what I grew up reading, and that's what I want to, get old conveying, and drawing and writing. And again, a lot of people can look at my art and go, oh, that's so retro. It's so 1960s, 70s, Silver Age, Bronze Age, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, so what? That's what I'm making here. That's the kind of comics you're going to get from me.
It's a sensibility.
Totally, man. And I mean, and I'm curious. Does a 24-year-old pick up that book today and just kind of sneer at it, or do they embrace it and go, well, let me give this a shot? I don't know.
Well, I don't think many 24-year-olds pick up comics anymore, unfortunately.
That's true. Although maybe they do when they're using their phone and they come across line Webtoon.
Yeah.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
I know a lot of my students have read webcomics a lot. So I think that's where they get. I don't know if they go to the comic shop as much as they shop online for either webcomics or digital comics.
Right.
Now, obviously,
real quick, webcomics. Just again, hard for me to define this. A webcomic is like the Red Hook and Warcry online, right? A digital comic is when you download it. Is that the idea?
Okay, this is a distinction that for so many years the Eisner Award Committee could not understand. A webcomic is, as the name suggests, anything that can be consumed through a web browser.
Got it.
Now, it can be consumed through other means. So, for instance, you mentioned the Webtoon app. I don't use the app. I look at Webtoon comics online through a web browser. Right. But if you wanted to, you could get the app and then see the comics that way. If a comic can't be viewed through a web browser, as sequentially, then it's a digital comic. So, in other words, many people will conflate webcomics and the kind of stuff that you may find through, I don't know, Comixology or other such places. Now,
right.
They're both digital comics, but not all digital comics are webcomics.
Got it. Okay. All right.
So that's the professorial moment of the night.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. So, but again, going back to what you said, like there's probably not a lot of 24-year-olds going to the comic shop. I do wonder what the metrics are. Is it just is it just us guys occasionally hitting the comic shop and picking up the trade? Like who's buying comics?
Yeah. There may be more younger readers than we're aware of.
Well, I hope. When I worked at the public library, I saw lots of like young kids and teens in the library all the time looking at the comics.
Right.
But they're trades and graphic novels.
Yeah, they're
right?
trade. Yeah. True.
And they're free, Gene.
And they're free.
I want to know the kids that are busting out their wallets and
laying down 15 cents.
Yeah. They're hard-earned 15 cents. Yeah, no, but a couple weekends ago, there was a micro Comic Con at my local shop, Comics Revolution, and I was one of the cartoonists there, which was bizarre. But so I'd never been in a comic shop for like 4 hours straight before. It was on a Saturday, and there was a pretty wide variety of people that came in. But I was surprised at how many families came in with fairly young kids, and they were looking around. Right? It was a weekend, yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and I know that's the what like Free Comic Book Day is supposed to be doing is drawing families and let's say non-readers into the store, hopefully, and it's usually around like a big movie coming out that weekend.
Right.
But I do hope, and I imagine that weekends would be the time when you go, all right, hey, let's do something together. We're not, the parents aren't working, the kids are antsy. Let's go to a comic shop, and get some stuff for you to read. I'm hoping that's what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I know I didn't need that as a kid because I was already going to the comic shop on a Wednesday. So I actually never went to comic shops on a weekend because I was already there for like a few hours on in the middle of the week, but I'm hoping that is happening more and more. I mean, again, that's we're just, speculating right now.
Yeah. But again, I was just amazed because I had no idea if there were like younger readers that came to shop because normally they're on a Wednesday and it's like, mostly people my age, but there's like some college kids there too. Right. But on the weekend, I saw a much broader spectrum than I was expecting. And that made me feel really happy because they weren't there for the Comic-Con, most of them, because it wasn't even that well publicized.
Right.
They were just there this is something we're going to do on a Saturday afternoon. And it was really cool to see.
Right. And then real quick. So, when I met you, were not doing comics and now you're making comics, man. How do you like that?
It's a lot of fun. It's more fun than writing.
Yes, it is. And Derek, do you dabble?
Not in comics, no, and not even in writing anymore. So,
it's never too late to start.
Well,
or you could just.
I don't write creatively, a lot of food. At least. Huh?
You what?
It's non-creative writing.
Got it. What? So is this kind of like your way of being creative? Is to do the podcast and the website and stuff?
Yeah. I mean, writing for the blog is writing, but I also do critical academic writing.
Right.
Okay, now, Dean. I mean, obviously, this new Brooklyn project, as we can tell from your enthusiasm, is vast and keeps you busy. But I'm curious to know if there are any other projects that you are currently working on right now that aren't Red Hook or New Brooklyn related that you could tell us about.
Well, I've been writing plays recently. I had a play produced last fall, and then a play produced, I guess, this winter or early spring. 2 different plays that was pretty amazing, and I learned a lot from that. It's just a different way of writing, and I'm telling stories or writing stories that for the stage for people to say out loud. And in a way, it kind of informs the way I'm starting to write my comics a little bit because with actors. This is really interesting. So with actors, no one wants a small walk-on role. They'll do it, to serve the story, and to be in a play or to be in something. But, at the end of the day, they want a little bit of a character arc, right? So in my current script that I'm writing, which is really ambitious and it's about as Kirby cosmic as I can get. I realized that I had a few little character bits that were just there to serve the story. And now I'm going back and giving them little character arcs because of that, like tiny little bits, but enough to sanctify what's in my head and giving them a little more meat, in that way. And that's because of working with actors and realizing, so in a way that these characters become even more alive, not only for me as the creator and the writer and the artist, but for the reader, so that there's not one throwaway character. You read a lot of superhero comics have to have throwaway characters because of a crowd or a situation where someone gets saved and that's it. All they did, their purpose was to get saved, right? But
they're a platform.
Yeah. And for me, it's just like, wait, I think I can do more with that. So as I'm writing and moving along, and once in a while I have that little bit, I'm going back and seeding it in a different way so that there's a bigger moment, or more connections. It's about making even more connections throughout the story. So anyway, sorry, I just went back to New Brooklyn with my answer. But I'm always writing other stuff. I have a lot of other ideas. I would love to do a story about Frankenstein. I love the Frankenstein lore, and I did a 10-page story in Heavy Metal last year called Frankenstein Unrequited.
Yes.
And then I came up with a pitch idea called Frankenstein Forever that I would love to do.
You got a little Frankenstein here with Dr. Hugo Girl.
Yes.
Romeo pathologist.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe even a little bit of Leatherface, or I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a big Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan. And you got the joke on that, right? Hugo Girl?
Mm-hmm.
You go, girl.
Oh.
Yeah.
I know it's really silly.
I didn't catch it.
Yeah, well, Iron Knee is just me being a goofball, and that's where these ideas come from. I swear to God, it's as simple as that, And then I'm thinking, well, homeotherapy, but they're dealing with their romance, so make it Romeo. I can't even say the word. But that's where these ideas come, and then you try to, and then what you do is you add a little bit of something realistic into the story, and then it makes it real. It's no longer a farce; it's real now. That's the fun part. But yeah, just going back to what am I working on? I mean, right now I'm heavily focused on this, but I would love on Red Hook and New Brooklyn. But I would love to dabble more with Billy Dogma. I'm thinking about maybe starting a Patreon and Billy Dogma being the comic that I do on Patreon. I'm not sure. I don't know if that would fail or if that would be awesome. I can't figure that one out. I just have to pull the trigger at some point. And just writing screenplays and plays, completely different stories have nothing to do with Red Hook.
Well, Dean, when might we expect the publication of the second volume of Red Hook, Warcry?
Well, hopefully Warcry would be coming out fall of 2019. That would mean that the current book I'm working on right now would be coming out, let's say, fall 2020, because it needs a certain amount of time where it lives on the Line Webtoon site exclusively,
Right.
Okay, so that's part of your contract?
That's part of the contract. So I would encourage anybody listening to this right now, whether you picked up the Red Hook or not, please go read the Red Hook online, for free, and then read Warcry. And then if you like it, go pick up the book. I always say you can't gift a GIF, So pick up the damn book, and not only for yourself, but let other people know about it. And it is a little bit of a different experience in print.
Well, Dean, we want to thank you for coming on the Comics Alternative and talking about your new book, Red Hook, Volume 1, New Brooklyn, which is out in stores, all kind of stores, tomorrow. Or today, in fact.
Today. Because we're recording this in the past for the future.
That's right.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you, Gene, for talking to me about this.
Certainly.
It was a lot of fun, Dean. Thanks so much. That could have gone on a lot longer, I think. There's so much to talk about. I'm really looking forward to getting onto Line Webtoons and checking out Warcry, because I really enjoyed the Red Hook a lot, and I hadn't been reading it online.
Yeah, it's worth checking out. And if you don't mind reading comics in digital format, like reading something online or through an app, yeah, you can get your Red Hook that way. But support Dean. Buy The Red Hook, the new book from Image Comics.
Yeah, definitely.
Then you can read Warcry online.
Exactly, and it's the book is chock full of stories. Again, for like a book that's just under 200 pages, you've got a ton of story in there, a ton of stories, but also the storytelling itself is dense and fun to read and even just to look at.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing what he does with other narratives within his New Brooklyn.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to more subtle hints along the way as to how the world works.
Yeah. And if you want to find great books like Dean's, and in fact, if you want to find his new book, The Red Hook, Volume 1, New Brooklyn, then be sure to check out the website of our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com and you will find a whole slew of specials. That's dcbservice.com. And after you do get your titles there, get in touch with us and let us know what you thought about our interview with Dean. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can contact us the old-fashioned way by picking up your phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
Or you can reach us by email if you still have a computer that has email on it. I think those things still exist. If you want to talk to the show, we are two guys, TWO guys, at comicsalternative.com. I am Gene with a G at comicsalternative.com. And Derek?
I'm Derek with a D at comicsalternative.com.
Oh, that's how you spell it.
Yes, it is.
The traditional spelling.
Mm-hmm. We also are very active on social media. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, Slack, and Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on Spotify, on TuneIn, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to the website, comicsalternative.com.
More comics news and reviews, and you can shake a stick at.
That's right. And, we like people to shake sticks, but just not at us.
Yeah, you shake the stick at the other stuff, not at us. We're good. We've had most of our shots.
Yeah, that's good. We have many more interviews lined up in the days and weeks to come, so check back for those. Until then, I'm Derek.
And I'm Gene.
Take care.
Bye-bye.